In a world where women's bodies were battlegrounds and their lives were reduced to the size of their skirts, rebellion was a dangerous game. And yet, whispers of defiance carried on the wind. Tales of women who fought back against the silent, unseen oppressors. There were women like Margaret Clitheroe, a 16th-century English woman whose defiant spirit burned brighter than the flames that ultimately took her life. Or the anonymous peasant women of 18th-century France who, tired of the daily grind and the constant fear of punishment, rebelled against their patriarchal oppressors. Their acts of defiance, no matter how small, were monumental. For in those acts, the seeds of change were sown. The problem was that change takes time to grow, and these women didn't have much of that. Their worlds were harsh, unforgiving, and decidedly unmodern. Theirs was a reality where basic human rights were luxuries and survival meant perpetual subjugation. Yet they resisted. They defied, they dreamed. And in doing so, they paved the way for generations to come. They were not celebrated. They were not conquerors. They did not live to see the dawn of a better day. But their stories, their struggles, and their triumphs are our triumphs. For their sacrifices echo in the rights we now enjoy, the freedoms we take for granted, and the very fact that we can stand against injustice without the threat of public mutilation hanging over our heads. Their silent screams in the darkness became the soundtrack of our progress. Their tears in the dead of night watered the seeds of our liberation. And their quiet acts of defiance in the face of an uncaring world serve as a reminder of how hard-won our freedoms are, how fragile they remain, and how vital it is that we, their daughters and granddaughters, continue the fight for a better, more equitable world. Because every step forward, every voice raised against oppression, every life reclaimed from the shadows is a testament to the silent screams of the past. It is a tribute to the women who dared to dream of a different world, a world where their bodies and their voices were their own. What if pain wasn't enough? What if her suffering had to come from within, hidden, silent, invisible until it was too late? That was the logic behind a device small enough to fit in the palm of a hand, yet cruel enough to haunt centuries of whispered stories. They called it the pear of anguish. At first glance, it appeared delicate. A hollow metal bulb, smooth on the outside, shaped like a pear. But within lay a mechanism of destruction. At the turn of a screw, it opened like a flower. Slowly, methodically, its iron petals spreading apart, tearing at whatever soft flesh enclosed them. This was not used on soldiers. It was not intended for thieves. It was reserved for the invisible crimes of women. Accusations of abortion, of forbidden love, of speaking too boldly, of refusing a man's advances, or simply of sinning in ways that left no visible mark. With the pear of anguish, justice no longer needed proof. Suspicion was enough. There were variations. Some versions were inserted into the mouth, others into the womb, others still into the rectum. But when turned against women, it most often targeted the very source of life, the womb, or the voice, the mouth. In both cases, the symbolism was deliberate. Silence the womb, silence the voice, silence the woman. Imagine the scene. A damp stone chamber beneath a monastery. A woman bound to a wooden table, her arms stretched and her legs tied. A priest standing nearby, his face unreadable, his presence enough to declare the act holy. The torturer places the metal pear into her mouth, or worse, and turns the screw. Slowly, relentlessly. Her eyes widen in disbelief. Her body strains against the bindings. The tearing begins inside. At first silent, then screams. Screams that echo through the stone walls, muffled by the knowledge that no one will ever help her. The pear of anguish did not always kill. In fact, it often left the victim alive, but broken, maimed, transformed. A woman might survive only to find herself infertile, or never able to speak clearly again. Her very identity, her role as mother, as nurturer, as voice within her community, destroyed from the inside. That was the goal. Not just to hurt, but to alter. To leave scars that carried the message long after the chamber was silent. In some cases, it was even cloaked in the language of purification. Church officials called it cleansing. As though mutilation could sanctify. As though cruelty could be dressed as holiness. But there was nothing holy about it. The pear was not a tool of justice. It was a tool of erasure. It attacked what society feared most. A woman who could speak, a woman who could choose, a woman who could create. But for some women, the torment did not come in hidden chambers. For them, punishment was worn like clothing. A prison shaped as a garment. At first glance, it resembled armor. A breastplate. A corset of gleaming metal. But this was no protection. It was the opposite. This was the iron corset. Locked tightly around the torso, it pressed into ribs and hips, its iron bands compressing the body until every breath was a struggle. Some versions were lined with spikes, digging into flesh with every movement. Others were weighted, pulling down on the spine until the body bent beneath its own burden. Imagine working, cooking, cleaning, sleeping. Every action in agony. The corset did not just wound. It wore the victim down slowly, invisibly. A punishment that lasted not minutes or hours but days, weeks, sometimes months. Bruising and bleeding were common. Dislocated ribs too. Even organ damage. But death was rarely the intention. The corset's cruelty lay in its duration. It was not designed to end life. It was designed to reshape it. To turn daily existence into a theater of pain. And unlike other devices, it was portable. Women were forced to wear it under their clothes, carrying their torment with them through every moment of their lives. Every breath a reminder of their supposed sin. Every gasp an echo of their subjugation. In France and Italy, young girls were locked into such corsets for moral improvement. In parts of Germany, they were strapped onto women accused of laziness or impurity. And often no court was involved at all. No trial, no jury. Sometimes not even a public accusation. A husband could order it. A father could enforce it. A community could demand it. Authority required no permission to place iron on a woman's body and call it discipline. And the most chilling part was not just the pain. It was the transformation of a symbol. The corset, once a garment meant to emphasize beauty, was twisted into a device of control. Femininity itself was weaponized. The very curves of a woman's body were turned into a prison. Her waist, her chest, her breath. Every part of her femininity became a point of attack. So when you think of medieval torture, you usually picture men. Men being burned, men being hanged, men being torn apart by horses. But what about women? How were they punished? Well, join me as we explore the dark world of medieval women's prison. First up, we have the corset. It sounds fancy, almost fun. But believe me, this was anything but. This was a device of oppression, a tool of terror. It squeezed a woman's torso not to make her look good, but to make her small and weak. Imagine being wrapped up in a tight dress, your ribs aching, your lungs struggling to work. That's what a corset did. It was designed to warp a woman's body, to punish her for existing. It was a weapon. Made of metal, whalebone, or wood, laced tight until it hurt. The goal was to crush a woman's spirit along with her body. And let's be clear, this was no fashion statement. This was pure torture. It was used on prisoners, on those accused of witchcraft, on women who simply didn't fit in. It was a way to control them, to keep them weak and helpless. But the corset wasn't enough for some women. Even that extreme was not enough. For some women, their bodies were their strength. But there was still the voice. A voice that could question. A voice that could defy. A voice that could refuse silence. For this, there was another invention. A device forged not to bruise the body but to muzzle the mind. They called it a bridle. Next, we have the Iron Maiden. You've seen it in movies. It looks straight out of a nightmare. All sharp metal spikes inside a coffin-like box. It's like a cross between a bed and a cage. The worst part, it's not just scary, it's real. Or at least it was. Back in the Middle Ages, it was used to torture and execute people. The Maiden was a creation of the 16th and 17th centuries, popular in places like Scotland and Germany. The idea was to lock someone in this metal box, then slowly close the lid, trapping them inside. As the spikes went through their body, it wasn't a quick death. It was slow and painful. The Maiden wasn't just about ending a life. It was about making the death as horrible as possible. The story of each Iron Maiden is different. Some were locked up for heresy, opposing the church or questioning the king. Others were put inside for stealing or for crimes against the state. The most famous case might be Guy Fawkes. He was one of the group who planned to blow up the English Parliament in 1605. When caught, he was sentenced to die in the Maiden. While some accounts say he was crushed and died right away, others claim he survived for days, meeting his end on February 1606. What makes the Iron Maiden truly scary is the mental game. Imagine being locked up in that box, knowing that each turn of the screw brings you closer to death, feeling the spikes pierce your skin, hearing the screams of others as they meet their end. It wasn't just a physical torture. It was psychological torment. The Maiden created a sense of fear and dread that was as effective as its sharp metal teeth. After the job was done, sometimes the victims were tossed out onto the street, their bodies mutilated and broken. In other cases, the Iron Maiden stood as a warning. It stayed in public squares, a reminder of what could happen if you defied the powers that be. It was a symbol of control, a harsh reminder of who was in charge. These tales of medieval torture aren't just stories from the past. They remind us of how important it is to fight for justice and human rights today. By learning about these dark chapters, we can make sure such horrors never repeat themselves. So remember, knowledge is power. Stay curious and keep fighting for a better world. And if you want to dive deeper into these dark histories, I've got more videos waiting for you. Just click on that subscribe button and join me on this journey through time. Together, we can uncover the secrets and struggles of our past, ensuring that their stories continue to be told. Thanks for watching. Beneath the falsehood of the Iron Maiden lies a truth far darker. Because society never needed a mythical device to invent cruelty. The reality was already enough. The breast ripper, the pair of anguish, the iron corset, the scold's bridle. These were not fantasies. They were forged in fire and iron, tested on real flesh, applied to real women. Each of them carried not just pain but meaning. Each of them delivered a message, spoken in screams and silence, that women's bodies were not their own. These instruments were not born from madness. They were engineered, crafted with precision, designed not for efficiency but for symbolism. And the symbolism was always the same. A woman who dared to step beyond the lines drawn for her would be punished in the very parts of her being that made her female. Her breast, her womb, her voice, her body itself. Think of the breast ripper. To destroy the breast was to desecrate the sacred. To make motherhood itself a crime. Think of the pair of anguish. To invade the womb or the mouth was to silence creation and speech at once. Think of the corset. To wrap the body in iron was to imprison femininity, to turn beauty into agony. Think of the bridle. To pierce the tongue was to cut away identity, to erase words from existence. Each device was not simply a weapon. It was a statement. And the cruelty did not end with the iron. It lived on in the rituals that surrounded it. Public displays, parades of humiliation. Communities gathered to watch as women were mutilated, mocked, silenced. What was this if not theater? Justice disguised as entertainment. Morality turned into performance. The suffering of women transformed into a ritual that reinforced the order of the world. An order where obedience was survival, and silence was virtue. But why do these stories matter now? Why recall instruments long buried in the past, some real, some imagined? Because their legacy did not vanish with the rust. These devices tell us something about the structures that created them. They show us how cruelty was justified, codified, normalized. They reveal how entire societies could take the most intimate aspects of womanhood and make them targets. And they show us how quickly pain becomes spectacle. Take the Iron Maiden again. Though it was never real, it became legend. What? Because people wanted to believe it. They wanted to imagine a device that perfectly embodied medieval cruelty. And in that imagination, the female body became central once more. Even when inventing horrors, the world could not resist shaping them to punish women. It is easy to look back and tell ourselves that these were the dark ages, that such things could never happen now. But think carefully. The devices may be gone, but the logic remains. The logic that says women must be controlled, that their voices must be softened, that their bodies must be shaped to fit expectations, that their independence must be punished. Iron has turned to subtler tools, words, laws, images, but the message is familiar. The Iron Maiden, whether myth or memory, stands as a symbol of how easily society can turn violence into virtue. The corset stands as a reminder of how beauty itself can be weaponized. The bridle shows how speech can be criminalized. The pair of anguish shows how cruelty hides behind claims of morality. And the breast ripper reveals how even life-giving flesh can be treated as a site of shame. And yet, for all this darkness, there is one more truth. These devices did not destroy all women. Some endured. Some resisted. Some survived to whisper the stories that historians later found in fragments of records, in hidden testimonies, in the margins of dusty manuscripts. Their pain became memory. Their silence became evidence. And their survival, though fragile, ensures that we can tell their story now. These devices were not random curiosities. They were not accidents of cruelty. They were instruments of control, engineered with purpose, sanctioned by faith, enforced by law, and accepted by society. Each one carried a message sharper than its blades, heavier than its iron. A message that declared, again and again, that a woman's body was not sacred, not sovereign, not safe. The breast ripper did not just destroy flesh. It destroyed the symbol of nurture. The pair of anguish did not only tear the body. It silenced creation itself. The corset did not simply press ribs and bruise lungs. It turned beauty into prison. The bridle did not only pierce the tongue. It criminalized speech, transforming the voice into crime. And the Iron Maiden, though myth more than fact, reveals something perhaps even more unsettling. That when reality was not cruel enough, we invented new cruelties in our imagination. That we were not horrified by such fantasies, but entertained by them. What does it say about a culture that invents devices just to imagine women suffering inside them? What does it say about us, that we still find ourselves drawn to these stories, not in pity but in fascination? Perhaps it means that violence against women has always been more than punishment. It has been performance. A ritual repeated across centuries in different forms, but with the same goal: obedience, silence, control. And yet, the most disturbing part is not the devices themselves. It is how easily entire civilizations accepted them. Communities watched as neighbors were mutilated in town squares. Priests gave blessings as iron bit into flesh. Husbands ordered corsets locked onto their wives. Judges sentenced women to bridals for gossip. These were not hidden crimes. They were public rituals. They were done in daylight beneath the eyes of all. And instead of outrage there was applause, laughter, or worse, silence. That silence was the true accomplice. It allowed the iron to rust slowly, not from disuse but from time. It allowed the memory of women's suffering to fade into myth, into curiosities displayed in museums, stripped of their screams, reduced to artifacts behind glass. And yet the reality lingers. Even if the devices themselves are gone, the systems that birthed them still echo in the world we live in. Think about it. The breast ripper punished women for adultery. Today, women are still punished socially for choices that men make freely. The bridal silenced women who spoke too much. Today, women who raise their voices are still called names meant to shame. The corset turned beauty into pain. Today, beauty is still policed, reshaped, and enforced by systems that demand obedience in different forms. The pair of anguish claimed to cleanse sin. Today, morality is still twisted into a weapon to control women's choices. The iron may be gone, but the logic remains. And that is why these stories matter. Not because we wish to linger in horror. Not because we seek to glorify cruelty. But because forgetting them is dangerous. Forgetting them means repeating them.